Hello, hello. This is episode 26th of Rambling Weekly, and as the title suggests, the topic we're going to be talking about are things that have been lost but are not quite gone. Let's do this. As what's been a habit lately, I've been playing some of my music, so yeah, I hope that bumper is alright with you guys. I guess in a way I'm kind of doing it so that I could be like, hey, I should get back to doing that. Should start making some more of the music and keep on pressing with it. I'd like to. I just I get wrapped in some things, so it's kind of like, it happens. Lately, I've been actually getting back into writing, so one of the game ideas that I had that's not like it's entirely gone by the wayside, it's just we're actually going to try to hopefully do something about putting out maybe some smaller games and kind of build our way up to that if possible. So fingers crossed on that. Trying to turn this one into a story, and I think I mentioned it before. Seneki 4 kind of sidelined me in writing for a little bit. I just couldn't get anything going. Like I blitzed through the game, which took really long time, and then I started to be like, okay, let's get back into writing, and it literally took me like 2 or 3 weeks to be back into it. I'm like, yeah. So I'm finally getting back into it. That is that. I want to also say thank you, Kid Koala, for all the wonderful comments there. I appreciate them, and I did reply to them by the point that I'm recording this. He not too big of a fan of Tales. Yeah, As I said before, I was kind of dabbling between Dragon Quest VIII on the 3DS and Tales of Symphonia. Kind of dropped the Symphonia thing. For some reason, it's not really catching me at the moment, so instead, now it's kind of juggling Dragon Quest VIII and Persona 4 The Golden. And I've tried to play Persona 4 The Golden before 2 separate times. And at least once, and at least with the save file I have here, so it's probably just the one time. But I do have a habit of, if I stop a game, I'll start it back up, because usually I won't get back to it for months, even years, and then I'll just save over those old save states, and at that point I had like about 12 hours, and so we started anew, and I've caught up to where I was. I don't know if I'm liking it more. It's a little bit more challenging than I remember, because I've played through Persona 5, and Persona 5 I didn't think was too difficult. Maybe they made it easy or something, but there's some tricky stuff really early on in Persona 4 The Golden, so, but I'm about 10 to 12 hours into that now, so I'm like, yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'm also reading a new book. It's a new book to me. I'm reading a book called I don't think I mentioned it last time, but just in case if I didn't, I'm reading a book by Adrian Meyer, and it's called The Poison King, which is about Mithridates the Sixth during the time of let's just say the last little hiccups before the Roman Republic kind of goes kaput. Not completely kaput, but like a generation before Caesar. So not 50 years, but I mean Caesar pops up. Yeah, Mithridates 6 is around 100 BCE kind of thing. He starts to really get the whole thing moving there, around there at least. So I'm reading that, enjoying that so far. What else has been going on? Been working a bunch. That's that. Been writing, but beyond that, not too much. So I hope everybody else is doing well, doing fine, doing good, that sort of thing. This episode is actually inspired by something that happened to me a few weeks back, and what that is was that I had a dream. And I knocked over my microphone. I had a dream that I got to spend time with a dog that I had as a pet when I was like 2-3 years old. Now, I cannot consciously remember any of this. I mentioned this to my mother because I've known of the dog because my mom's mentioned it before. She'd always say how inseparable we were and everything. But what happened was we were at my grandmother's at one point, and like I said, I don't remember any of this. I was 2 or 3 years old, playing out in the yard with the dog. Somebody purposely drove off the road to hit the dog and then kept going. And I guess this happened in front of me and a few cousins and stuff like that. I don't remember any of this, but this dream that I had, this dog. And I woke up very sad. And this isn't the first time that this sort of thing's happened. And it's not, to me, I don't really see the dream interpretation thing, but I always find it interesting how, I don't know if like the brain's just trying to do something or just try to make things okay so you can get through the next day sort of thing. But I've had something peculiar happen when I was working in Japan where I basically dreamed a life. It literally felt like, and I hate that I've used that word twice already, literally, but it felt like I lived a whole life. Grew up, got married, had kids, became a grandfather and stuff, and at the end of the dream, I'm surrounded by families. I'm dying in a hospital bed, and then I wake up in tears, and it was such a visceral experience, which is weird because it's a dream. But to wake up and that sort of thing, because I was disoriented. I woke up and I didn't know where I was for a moment. I didn't know who I was, didn't know where I was, didn't know anything. I was just kind of like, what? It was surreal. I bring up the first dream because it's those two examples in particular. It's these things that with the dog Teddy. I should just say the dog's name was Teddy. But with Teddy, I after that dream, I thought how not even just like how somebody could be so callous to purposely be as much of a psycho to do that sort of thing. That's like a given thought to have, but the more thought about it was how that affected me. Particularly at that time when you're, not really, like the earliest memories I have this really fuzzy memory of walking down a hallway with a bunch of pictures that my mom attests is from when we were in Arizona for a bit, and beyond that, I don't really have, that's the earliest memory I have, which would put, somewhere between like 1.5, 2. She says, so when you have all that stuff kind of going on, I always wonder how much of that really affects you and kind of pushes you and pulls you and tugs you in different directions, and whether or not you kind of keep going that way sort of thing, the whole nature versus nurture sort of thing. And for myself, I kind of wonder if that didn't, coupled with as a kid in elementary school, there was a few friends that I had, but despite my, for the most part, naivete, just kind of general cheeriness, I guess, in a way. Not always. I wasn't like a malicious kid. I was goofy. There's certainly some things that go back and like, but I mean, that's no different than now. I'm just kind of goofy. I wonder how much of that was exacerbated by not really fitting in with school I was at, because I grew up in a small town, but I wasn't initially from there. Half of my dad was from there, but my mother wasn't, so kind of was ostracized a good deal from people just because that's just how they were. They were like, oh, if you're not from here, like a lot of small towns have this sort of attitude that I don't understand, where it's like, well, you're not from here, so we don't want you outsiders around here kind of thing. And it's just like, why what's the big deal? I don't know how much of that kind of came out through that. So basically, where I'm getting with that is I sort of developed a very, and I hate to say it this way, but I'll put it a different way, independent Very independent. Just kind of okay with doing things myself, sort of thing. Don't want to say lone wolfish, because then it's like, oh, he's a lone wolf. He does his own sort of things. He plays by his own. No, it's just, very independent sort of thing. We're not socially stupid, but I guess developed more into being a little enjoying watching people kind of talk a bit more than kind of being a part of a conversation a lot of times. That's something I notice a lot with work is that I'm not too much of a conversationalist, partially because a lot of the interests that I have, a lot of others don't, so that, and they're just kind of, just kind of like, oh, how you doing, yeah, catch a game over the weekend, yeah, do. It's nothing against anybody like that. It's just more of differences in tastes and sort of stuff. So it's something that's really like I do really well with like one-on-one conversations, but when you start kind of getting into bigger groups, they start to recede a bit more. And I wouldn't say it's an introvertedness, but maybe it is. I kind of just like to catch and observe how other people interact with one another and stuff. Not like, let's look at the ant colony sort of thing, but that's about the best way I can put it. Yeah, that's something that I kind of wonder how much of that kind of stems from having that sort of traumatic experience, because how my mom puts it, we were inseparable, and then all of a sudden that's taken away. Like for example, I grew up with having some birds for a while. Don't know why, but having some birds for a while, having some cats for a good deal. I certainly didn't like dislike the animals or anything like that, but I always kind of felt like have them at arm's length. And I think partially because I grew up like incredibly poor, so for me it's like, why do we have these animals when we're barely struggling to get by? I mean, I get the companionship of it probably helps over, it might be seen as more valuable than having more things to eat. Personally, I would have preferred more things to eat, but that's a long time water under the bridge, already down by the ocean at this point. But there was a point I remember that found this baby bird, and it had fallen out of its nest or something, but it was in the middle of the road, and so I took it and tried to give it grapes and these sorts of things for a bit, but it never it didn't. Chirpy was what we named the bird, but the bird did not. I don't think it lasted more than like 5 or 6 days, and I think that's kind of pushing it there. Like that always stuck with me really bad, like in a bad way, but in a good way sort of thing, because it's like your first kind of pet dying sort of thing. Even though I wasn't really intending it for it to be the pet, that's kind of what ended up happening, because we, mother bird either got hit by a car, or I don't really remember what happened. Just thinking, oh well, humans have interacted with it, so it's not gonna want it anymore, kind of thing. It certainly sticks in your head a bit. Like that one's always a really good lesson. I feel like growing up, kids should learn that sort of thing. I think understanding differences in relationships is very important, which is why, like, when a lot of, not to be giving parental advice or anything like that, but I really don't like when I see parents wanting to try to be friends with their kids, particularly when they're like really young, because while it might endear them for a bit, I kind of wonder if that doesn't, in the long term of things, not play out very well. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm just not. Maybe I don't see enough examples of it working out, where and I'm just being biased about it. But it feels like when parents or teachers try more to be friends instead of kind of showing like a difference in the relationship. It's not. I mean, you can still be friendly. It's not like you have to be like this complete just slab of stone sort of thing, but I wonder if it doesn't have a bit of an adverse effect for people growing up to not really be able to understand nuances or dynamics in a relationship. And I'm not just meaning, boyfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, that sort of thing. I mean more in the sense of just dealing with differences in situation, like what am I trying to fucking say? Situational social interactions and relationships, I guess. Words. These words have meaning, and I feel like half the time I just say them to say them. But then I always kind of think of the time period where that kind of came out, where it's a period, the time period where you don't really have memory of stuff. Like, this is similar to how I feel with just a lot of what happened before I'm really cognizant of things, or, even like leading up to your birth sort of thing. Because I've talked to both my mom and my dad, and they give two wildly different stories about things. Shocker, they divorced when I was really young, so not surprised there. Like, I can only kind of look at what both of them are saying. I could either pick pieces, parts, or in some way try to meld the two together in this discordant timeline sort of thing, or at some point you just kind of give up and you're just like, whatever, and just sort of take instances to be like, okay. But then when the instances don't jive up, you just sort of, at least I just sort of like, okay, delete kind of thing. I don't know. Like, if anybody, has anybody ever had those experiences where they have like a dream or something, or, ever think about those times prior to really being kind of aware of yourself? I don't know. I know I've mentioned this plenty of times before. I honestly feel the same as I do when I thought about myself way back when. And I don't know if that's just, A, if that's a really bad thing, B, if that's the actual common thing, or C, if it's a random thing that's just kind of happened with me, or D, it's a complete bias and I'm just kind of looking back on it. But I really don't seem any different than how I was as a kid. And that's not to say the naivete sort of thing. I guess instead of like a naivete, I kind of have I'm willing to have an openness for people to lie to me, I guess. But I'm unless it's something that could endanger me, I'm not gonna be like, why are you lying to me there? And it's more of like, oh, whatever, okay. So just, maybe it is just like a personality quirk that I have, where it's just like, oh, off in the clouds, do kind of thing. Then there's these things like these dreams that happen where consciously there are things that I've experienced that I do not remember. Plenty of things. Don't have super duper memory. We're gonna be like, oh yeah, back on November 23rd in 1994, I remember. Subconsciously they come out in this dream sort of thing, and I wonder how much of that is baggage for people. Like I've mentioned plenty of times before, I'm not sit there and dwell on things in the past sort of guy. So for me, when I have something happen like that, it's like, what? What the fuck is this? Yeah, I don't sit there and think of, relationships that have soured, things I've missed out on. Like, there are times where I do think of it where it's like, oh man, it would have been really, it's a bummer that happened. Like, there was a friend that I had for a couple years that I was fairly close with. If I remember correctly, his name was Logan. I remember going over to his place a couple times, and this is, kindergarten, first grade, something like that. And then he moved. And that was it. And then it just sort of, you kind of go about your day at that. Same thing sort of happened with buddy, like my best friend in elementary school. He ended up going to a different middle school and stuff, and then sort of kept in contact a little bit, and then randomly met each other going to the same college and stuff, and then he's gone off and done his own sort of thing. I guess I think everybody has those, what if sort of things they go through. Maybe not. I would imagine not I'm not meaning it more of a regrettable sort of thing, and just more of a curiosity sort of sake. Be like, I wonder what would have happened. But in the same hand, there were plenty of instances that were completely out of control, because you're a kid. I mean, there's plenty of instances, as an adult, that are completely out of your control, because you live in a world full of people, and people make choices that sometimes put you in a bad spot, kind of thing. I guess I kind of don't know where I'm going with this. I guess I just wanted to be treating this as my instead of making a payment to a therapist, just kind of I talk it into a mic today, sort of thing. I don't know. I particularly, I guess, the dream thing really kind of set me off with Teddy, because it was such a, I guess, because, here it is 30 years later, and all of a sudden now, why now? It's not like I'm struggling to be like, oh yeah, maybe it's subconsciously telling me like, oh, you should get a dog, which, I wouldn't be against. It'd have to be a big dog though. I like big dogs, they're cool. Bark. But maybe that's something that it's gonna, but it's just, I guess, a really peculiar thing, because it's outside of stuff that my mother's mentioned about. It's not something I've ever really given much of a thought to, which kind of makes me sad, because it's here is this evidently very loving relationship that I have with this this friendship that I have with this dog as 1-2-year-old, but I don't remember anything about it, and outside of talking about it during this podcast, it's really been nothing other than the dream thing and mentioning it to my mother recently, but it has not been anything I've thought about. So yeah, the end. But yeah, I guess that's just, I wanted to ramble in a little bit of that, like sticking true to the name of this podcast, Rambling Weekly. That's kind of what I'm doing. So yeah, that is it for me. If you've got any sort of experiences like that, let me know. I'm curious to hear what other people either think about that sort of thing, or if they have the same sort of thought where it's like, yeah, I'm pretty much the same person. I'm curious to know if that's just a bias, or if that's like a legit thing, or you can, like, there's certainly some things I can look back on and be like, yeah, you're being a dumbass here, but being a dumbass here isn't quite the same as like your internal monologue. Does it always stay the same? Anywho, thanks for listening, and have a good day.